shelves, and then we'll kind of get things rolling. Should we do one of those like backstage like huddles while we're waiting?
No.
I don't know any.
No.
I don't know any either. We're live, it looks like. Yeah.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to today's Quarantide session. In this edition, we are announcing the desktop plugin version of MicroPitch. This is a dual pitch shifted delay that can be used for stereo sweetening and chorus effects, as well as some lush repeating delays and creative sound design. Today, we're going to be talking about it with some of our friends in the industry. So I just want to say thanks so much to all of you for joining us on the session to share your thoughts, experiences, and tips on using this sort of effect. So I'm just going to finish up the announcement details and then we'll get into it. MicroPitch is available on desktop for intro pricing $39.99 and on iOS for promo pricing $6.99. This is live now, so you can go check it out on our site and request the free 30-day trial to use what you learned here today in your own sessions. From Eventide, I am joined by Chief DSP Engineer Russell. Russ mainly worked on this effect as well as plenty of others from Eventide's Factor Series pedals, H9, H9000, and several of our plugins. My name is Colin. I'm the product manager for plugins. I help organize or facilitate product release materials like presets and sound examples, and I help support our artists who are using these effects. So we were able to connect with these guys over the past week to get the MicroPitch into their hands. They are pros at the craft and have used plenty of MicroPitch shifting hardware effects from the likes of Eventide's history, including the H910, H3000, and more recently the H9. And today we're going to hear their thoughts, what came of their experiments, and how they think something like this is useful to different kinds of productions. So let's get an intro going around. I'll have you guys tell the stream who you are and what you do in the industry. And we'll start with Steve.
My name is Steve Marcantonio. I'm an audio engineer since the early 80s. I'm from Record Plant Studios in New York City. And I moved here to Nashville in about late 80, and I've been recording a lot of country artists through the years and won a Grammy for the Glenn Campbell movie. And I've been using Eventide for years. So I'm
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. Bill.
I'm Bill William Wittman. I've been an engineer producer since I think 1920, and have been using Eventide since pretty much the inception of Eventide. And I could mention Grammys too, but I'm not like.
Oh man!
Oh man! Aaron.
Hey, I'm Aaron Nevezie. I'm based in Brooklyn, in New York, at a studio called The Bunker. Been doing this a little less time than the previous gentleman, but maybe 15 years or something like that. And work in a bunch of different genres, but we do a lot of acoustic recording here. Everything from jazz to chamber music, and obviously the regular Brooklyn indie rock and pop and rock stuff as well.
Right on. Mike.
My name is Mike Dwyer. I am from Catskill, New York, and here in my home studio, I record mostly indie rock and pop rock bands. And more recently, I've started doing some TV composition.
Cool. Nick.
Hey, what's up? I'm Nick Hook. I'm in Brooklyn, New York right now. I'm an artist. I'm a producer. The last thing I did was score the Grand Theft Auto, my first scoring thing, and I work with rappers and I smoke a lot of weed.
Roy.
Hi, I'm Roy Hendrickson. I've been in New York making records since the middle 80s, and I've been basically largely based out of Power Station, since that's where I started. Studio stayed open all these years, and I just kind of stayed home, but I worked in just about every genre, and really still enjoy New York City and the music scene. But very happy to be with you guys. Fans
right on. Rich.
Rich Tozzoli, and I was an engineer for a long time, and transitioned into the world of TV composing, and I've been on 1,000 television series. I'm not making that up.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
It's been a while, Rich.
Lots of shows. I'm Roy, man, good to see you. And Mike Dwyer and I were just away in St. John together working until something hit us and we came back. And we used a lot of Eventide down there, didn't we, Mikey?
We certainly did.
And you guys like write reviews for this stuff all the time for
It's in Pro Sound
Network.
News. Yeah, the Pro Sound News write-up. Mikey and I both wrote it. I still call him Mikey, guys. Sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah. Look at him. How would you not call him Mikey?
What's the process for something like that? Like, do you guys, like, how do you find the time to set aside to take a deeper look at these things in the middle of doing TV cues and recording?
We
and all
just
that
put
stuff?
it to use and we say, oh, this would be good to include in the article and this is how we use it and this is what we're thinking about.
So it's very practical, like in your approach
Extremely
to
practical. Yeah, I mean,
diving in.
if we didn't like it, we wouldn't write about it. If we didn't use it, we wouldn't write about it. We only include stuff that we find really cool and useful.
Great. So I have a general question for all you guys, just to open it up. What are your favorite applications for micropitch effects in DAW-based production?
The brand new MicroPitch, the way you just released, obviously.
So just like any micropitch shifting technique, you know, on vocals or, you know, to make your bass sound wider or like what have you.
I just used it today and yesterday on big guitars because it can make the guitars huge. For lack of a better word, you get the Zakk Wylde sound, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
And with it used to be the H9, H3000, then I did it in the H9, and now with MicroPitch, man, wow, what a difference. And it's funny because Mikey and I call each other up on the phone, listen to this, listen to this. I just used it on a high string, like this, like a Nashville high string. And I used it on this high string, and I called Mikey up, right, like a half hour ago. I said, listen to this. So
It sounded awesome.
big guitars.
And that was like a metal production too, right?
And big metal sound, yeah.
Yeah.
You heard it. That was an 8-string, so it's pretty heavy.
Brutal.
Sorry, Mike, you were
Mike.
going to say something?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, one of my favorite uses for microshift is, lead guitars in almost every production I do. If you've got a guitar solo or a lead part, that's, panned right up the center, just to give it that tiny bit of width and a little bit of space without, taking up a ton of room in the mix with reverbs and delays and stuff.
I do the same.
Classic use of it.
A lot of times I do the same thing, but maybe I would maybe try quite a bit longer delays with that. Sometimes when I have a few things, what I notice about this plugin and some of the other more recent Eventide plugins, I speak of the 910 and all that, there's a sonic character to these things that's really smooth, and it's really obviously, you wouldn't really know that it was sort of a plugin texture, but I was really impressed by that. It sounds really smooth. I like that.
I'd say for me, square wave synth bass, like for the home run every single time. And then like snare drums, like anything really. I feel like for me, you just bring that in and you start to feel that swirl and that glue. And I think it kind of I don't know, the Eventide sound was the first one to like really lure me into that sound when I was little.
Oh,
So,
great.
yeah.
Do you find that that's like really important in synth production? Because that's like a pretty common thing, right? Like even just with two oscillators, detuning them slightly from one another.
Yeah, well, I feel like like when you do drone music or stack a bunch of analog oscillators together, that's natural to happen because they can't stay in tune really,
Right.
because they're all drifting. And I think for me, that brings like it starts to become free jazz when you have like 15 of them doing the same thing and you start to hear all those harmonics start to float around. So I don't know, I think it just becomes so beautiful versus that still oscillator where you have that subtle modulation that I think is so important.
Bill, you going to say something, Bill? Because I wanted to add one thing there. Did you want to
Yeah, I
say
got
something,
dropped
Bill?
off for a second. I was saying, for me, I'm not a big fan of, in most cases, of noticing reverb. Like I don't really want to hear reverb,
Mhm.
and on a lead vocal, in almost all cases, I much prefer something like MicroPitch that sits the vocal in a track in a way that you don't notice. You just go, oh, the vocal sits in the right place, without necessarily drawing attention to the effect. And especially because it can also add a little slight stereo spread in a way that's also can be very subtle if you want it to be subtle. That to me, that's what's always been appealing about that sort of effect. And also to touch on something I think Roy said, that you know, a lot of times I think we'll pick. I remember doing something where I had been recording the whole time using an AMS delay.
Right.
We came back to the record plant to mix, and they didn't have AMSs. We had Publisons and Eventides and other things, and immediately feeling like, oh, those guitars aren't sitting in the same place, that the character of the box is part of what makes it sit in your record a certain way. And what's really brilliant about these Eventide plugins is they have that character. They sit in the place that you expect an Eventide effect to sit. It's not just a generic digital plugin.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Bill, for sure. And Rich, you stole my thunder with the acoustic. That's what I record the most down here, and I love that effect on acoustic guitar. As a matter of fact, I worked with a producer, Josh Leo, many years ago, and we were on the Sony 48, and he would record a guitar, and then we would do two more, one down and one up. You know, sort of what
With
Mike
various speeds.
does. Yeah, and that would give you a natural, you know, pitch shift kind of thing. But I also find it really cool, although I very rarely like to touch a Wurlitzer. I like the nice distorted sound of Wurlitzer, but I put it on a Wurlitzer on this one song, and it was really cool. So
I mostly learned about this effect from working at Eventide. That's kind of when I was first exposed to this. The thing I like about working on it is it's so broad. It can be like really subtle. It can fix things. It can make things more pretty, but also it can make things like brutally scary. Like I'm pretty sure like Manson and Ministry, like this is a big trick on their vocals. Like just mix it in with like detuned 30 cents or something. And I like it. It's just a broad technique, you know?
actually, you know what? I want to touch up on what you just said and what Bill said, where he wants his things to be subtle. But a good friend of mine mentioned this to me about a couple years ago. He says he always likes to put effects on his mixes, at least one effect somewhere, because it's for the kids. The kids like the stuff. You know what I mean? And that thing you said about, like, I named one of my presets something haunting or whatever, but, you know, you get those delays in the feedback. It could be really, really cool and trippy. And I was telling Bill, too, believe it or not, on a steel guitar, it could sound really cool. And I'm sure you record steels every week there in Brooklyn. Anyway, yeah. Right on.
Yeah, in addition to what Bill was saying about lead vocal, I'm a huge fan of it. A lot of the time, on pop vocal especially, a good amount of widening. It's always super effective. And a lot of the time too with background vocals, just to sort of smooth things out, especially if you don't have a huge stack of them, just to get a little extra depth to a background vocal. You know, maybe you've only got doubles or something, you want to make it a little bit bigger. Super handy for that as well.
So did anybody discover a new use when using MicroPitch, this plugin in particular, or were you mainly looking to test it out in applications where you knew what you wanted to get out of it and figured out how to do it with MicroPitch?
I was totally taken by surprise by the delay side of things.
Yeah.
Because I was totally just expecting to use my like MicroPitch shift H3000 settings. How far am I going to go? How wide is it going to be? How delayed is it? And then just that's pretty much the way I think about MicroPitch 90% of the time. Using this, I totally love the sound of the delays. I made a bunch of presets that were just really fun with like some really dark sort of tape slappy things or some modulations. It can be like you can go really crazy with it, but the thing I really liked about it was that it could be really useful but colorful at the same time. You know, like, and it just seemed like I was like, oh, I'll totally use this as a delay plugin rather than just a pitch shifting plugin.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And anything that has a noticeable character makes you want to use it. You know what I mean? It just
Totally.
it's not just like, oh, I want a delay. It's like I want that sound, the sound of that thing.
Yeah, I mean, when I plug a piece of outboard in, and you guys have been doing that forever, you're plugging in the certain piece of outboard. You can use an Eventide or a Lexicon or whatever it is, because, you know, a space echo is going to sound like a space echo and nothing sounds like a space echo.
That's
I've
true.
been big
Tone
on.
control.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Do you guys use the tone control?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Oh yeah, I've been loving that.
That's my favorite, one of my favorite parts of it, because I can darken the guitars right away just with a tone. And thank you for putting that in, by the way.
Yeah.
I can see automating the ribbon controller, and
This is my move. The pencil on the iPad.
go for it.
Nice.
I set all the parameters and start going nuts, and then I'll record those passes with the pencil.
Countless
Nice.
times where I'm mixing and I want to have some special thing happen just once, but I want to perform it and sort of record it somehow and keep trying it until I get something that's interesting. And the ribbon thing, it seems cool. It's really quick to program.
Hmm.
And are most of you using it just as an aux?
I am.
No, I've been using it mostly as an insert, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing that with a lot of effects in the box, where I just duplicate my whatever track I want to use, and I put an effect on that track so that I don't need to use a send, because there might be places where I might want a little less or a little more, and I can also mess with the sound of the signal going to the processing.
Sure.
So I do that a lot. I put it right on the exact thing.
I went mono to stereo today with the high string on the Earthworks mic, and it made it like "Here Comes the Sun."
Yeah, I'm mostly a fan of the mono to stereo use. I'm always looking for another way to make a mono thing into pseudo stereo, and it's
Right.
brilliant for that.
Were you able to get close with that? Here comes the sun sound.
I will never say close to that classic, but
They use the MicroPitch on that sound.
Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of curious, is there like a list of like sound examples you would tell like the viewers to try to recreate using this that like come to your mind immediately?
not yet. But that was immediately what came to mind, because I doubled the high string and then I mono to stereoed both of them. And the MicroPitch has this kind of flange setting on one of the presets that's just outrageous. And if you put it all together, you got a pretty huge guitar sound for a Nashville tuned high string.
That's cool.
Yeah. The super short delay settings are really cool. Like the really ringy, flangey stuff is where for me, especially with the tone control, it gets really fun.
Yeah.
Get some almost like Aphex Twin, like super ringy, delay,
Mhm.
buzzy, modulating stuff.
Do you use the feedback when you do that?
Oh yeah, big time. And that's what's really cool with the ribbon controllers. If you're using the ribbon controller on the feedback and the tone, you can get these cool ringing, sweepy things that are. I mean, I just think of Aphex when I hear that stuff.
I think
So
I made a preset that sort of approximates the Time After Time guitar also,
Oh, cool.
Oh yeah.
which was actually done with a Publison. Tony told me it's okay to say that.
Is that what that was?
but it's very much the same idea of small, slightly drifting pitch shifts and short delays, instead making a mono guitar stereo. So I mean, it comes very, very close to that.
Yeah.
That's a great guitar sound.
Yeah, that's right. And the Publis. Yeah, okay. We won't talk about that.
You can't buy it anymore. You can talk about it.
Yeah,
And that's the one with the knobs, because they make them too with just the buttons. It's not the same thing.
no, that later iteration
Yeah, no.
blows
Different
actually.
box,
But the first DHM-89 was pretty cool.
I still have one.
Do you?
Oh,
Wow.
jeez.
There's 3 of them. I just they need to be repaired, so they're in line. Won't be getting attention for a little while yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I miss them. All these boxes have really such character.
Yeah, they were half digital back then. Like most of these guys were designing their own converters. It's like you
Yeah.
couldn't buy an
Yeah.
off-the-shelf converter.
Yeah.
You plug
That
Yeah, 910 is a
has the
great one.
characters. Yeah.
Is that all right? Yes.
That might be my kids talking. Sorry.
Yeah,
As long as it's not the voices in my head, we're okay.
Nick smokes a lot of weed. Maybe I need to. I don't know.
It looks like Nick is surrounded by a cloud there, you know.
I got the sour diesel's on deck right now.
Should have showed me that, Nick. I might take a flight to New York right now.
But this my house is your house, baby. Come through.
Yeah, all right.
I got other things too.
Yeah. Cool.
All healthy. Don't worry.
So what do you guys think some of the more extreme settings in this plugin lend themselves to? Aaron, you touched on sort of like an intense flange, right? Because you can do like high feedback, and you have the tone control shaping.
Obviously, like you know, you can get pretty crazy. I mean, Steve was talking about, you know, sort of just workflow in terms of whether you put stuff on auxes or whether you put it on, you know, insert on tracks. One of my favorite things in Pro Tools, and I'm sure you can do this with the bouncing tracks if you want to, is Audio Suite. When I'm mixing, I'll just take sections of songs and Audio Suite the whole drum kit with an effect, whether it's a reverb or pitch shifting it or Audio Suite a gate on something. I love just really extreme moves for moments or for sections. And so I would, you know, take a really extreme thing and just do it on a beat or a bar or, you know, a few beats and then maybe Audio Suite it again. So those extreme settings, I feel like that's where I would use that most often.
You can also commit, you know, you might save yourself some time. Roy, you can't commit, Roy. Sorry.
I love commit. That's my favorite part with Pro Tools these days.
You got me.
Yeah.
I feel like also that just that like classic, like -5, become the monster, put it on your voice, chopped and screwed, pitch it up 5. I feel like you could just start flipping things. And like you say, if you commit to the audio, just print those down and grab a new track and like keep flowing with, you know, stacks and up and down. Yeah. And the panning on the A/B I've been having fun with, because I think you can really, depends on how you swirl with it, but to go, that was, I feel like something you don't see much is the A and the B to pan versus a lot of other effects. That was, I think, new for me.
That's true.
That was new for me too. Actually.
Yeah.
It's almost out of necessity because it was originally in a guitar pedal. And we only had a certain number of knobs, and we had to do something.
Well, even a couple cents each way, like you can rub in a different way, and then I feel like make it, you know, that's what I've been having fun with.
Sure.
Hey, Colin, one thing I wanted to bring up. I know I'm sure you might update your plugin, and I don't think it deals so much with effect, but it's surprising how many plugins don't have phase in and out. You know, and I'm not sure what it would do on the pitch shifter, but it seems like whenever I get a plug, I would expect there to be a phase switch.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, like we do that on our like E channel and like Ultra channel, you know, the channel strip stuff.
Yeah.
And we also have like it's mostly like a utility thing so far as our plugins are concerned. On precision timeline and time delay, you can use the phase flip because that's also, you know, for like lining up tracks.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect the hardware box to have it, Steve.
I know. Well, you wouldn't expect any hardware box to have a mix knob either, Bill. So
well, maybe.
But that's an interesting point because if you look at the flanger plugin, there's the depth control on that adds the dry signal back in with the flange signal, either in phase or out of phase on the same depth control.
See, Bill? See?
Well, but that's adds it in phase on one side versus on the other side as you're sweeping that, right?
Yeah, that's right. So
so there's always
depth at 0 is noon, and then one side is dry signal in phase or out of phase.
Right.
Yeah,
so
well, you get
which is
plus
why
and
it
minus.
does that thing.
Yeah, you get plus and minus flanging. You know, slight different sound.
And if you're using this to do flanging, the MicroPitch plugin, then, you know, that's totally a valid thing to do.
Well, you know, I was using it. I put it on an instrument, a sort of, you know, dreamy, druggy sort of clean guitar. And I like flanges a lot, and I like to put subtle ones on. So I set it totally wet and put a very short or no delay, just a little bit of pitch shift and made it mono again, but I had to go find a plugin to do that. But it was a cool sounding flange, happy accident, but I'm always looking for new ways to have either subtle or interesting sounding, moving things like that.
Yeah, exactly. To me, contrary to your question, Colin, I guess to me so far the beauty of this has been that it just makes things sound more interesting or sit better without it drawing attention to itself so much. Mm-hmm. Although I can see why the instinct is to immediately go to something extreme with it, but you don't have to. And I guess most of the work I do is not looking for it to sort of jump out at you like that. But I think it's kind of great that it doesn't have to.
Sure.
That's a good point, because I muted those micro pitches. I had 2 of them and I muted them, and they were like, 15% different. And
Yeah.
it was perfect. It's just what I wanted. I didn't really want you to hear it, but if you take it out, you'll hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's how I usually use it, is more subtle stuff. But those extreme ones certainly can be fun. Like earlier today, I was messing around with MicroPitch on a synth part. It was like a plucky synth thing, and yeah, it had like, I don't know, like a 1 millisecond delay or something, and just a tiny bit of pitch shift, and then crank the feedback up to like 100, and it was like doing crazy, like
dive effects.
Yeah, it was like it was making it a completely different synth part. So that sort of like became the part just by cranking a couple of knobs. Making a whole new sound that wasn't there before.
And that's like a thing that you could do with the H910, right? Because it was a pitch shifted delay. So every time that it would feed back into itself, it was going up and up and up.
It's on a lot of records like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Some really obvious.
Do you know any off the top of your head that you would say? Like,
David Bowie, the snare sound. That's the famous one, right?
AC/DC.
Well, exactly. The AC/DC, the Mutt Lang Forever would set a harmonizer at 87 or so and delay, and then it would go every time it hit the snare.
Yeah. A lot of examples. You don't hear that people are doing that too much these days, but they're on a lot of records.
Yeah. Well, I'd still do it a lot, but hide it. It's that thing of, again, I don't really want it to jump out like Back in Black, but it just sits to the snare in the track.
A little meat or texture.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have a 910?
I do.
Yeah.
And also the 910 plugin is pretty great.
It's really great.
Yeah.
That's another one where the character is really obviously great.
Didn't Eventide made the DDL, right? Remember the first DDLs?
Yes.
17.
The knobs.
First one had 2 big click stop.
You couldn't go in between. You couldn't just set what you wanted. It was And then there was the one with the digital display.
Yeah, we had those.
Yeah.
That was a 1745.
Man.
I think weren't they all 1745, and one was A and one was M, and they were I don't know.
The M was for memory, right? That was like the preliminary pitch shifting circuit. Russ, do you know the answer to that?
I don't remember the model numbers. I know that those were actually shift registers. They were like dinosaurs when it comes to digital processing. What did you guys use it for? That whopping 200 milliseconds of delay.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, I'm setting up gear. I always had the DDLs. We call them DDLs. You know, whether on a room mic, maybe on a room mic. Did a lot of stuff with the guiles, claps, foot stomps, stuff like that.
Sure.
Yeah. J guiles, that is. Anyway, yeah.
I heard a lot of people used it for pre-delay, right? Like going into their plate.
Yes.
It's a great way to separate the reverb and make it stand out without having to turn it up so much.
Yeah.
And probably a really expensive way to get.
And you know what we used before? You know what we used before the DDL? Was bingo. Yep.
Respect to y'all, man. Thank you.
You guys didn't use that garden hose thing in a cube?
The Cooper's Time Cube?
Yeah.
We had a killer stairwell, though, on the 10th floor. No, Bill?
Did you guys really have one?
What's that?
At MicroPlant?
Oh, yeah, the 10th floor? Absolutely.
Oh, man, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that I never went to see the studio. I had tons of friends that were working there back in the day.
I had a session booked with Bob Clearing Mountain. He showed up, and they brought 4-track tape instead of 24-track tape.
Oh, really?
And we never did it. Never won.
Not too bad. Oh, man.
Hey, they need to make a plug-in for Eventide with the scratched out letters like we always used to do.
I was going to mention that, right?
We can't do that.
That would be dangerous.
I know the reference. I can see it from a mile away.
I mean, do they still make, what are grease pencils used for these days?
I have them here. I got them here.
Okay, all right. Yeah, except for Roy.
Should we just give a prize to someone who can guess what that is?
No.
Offline.
Right.
Offline.
Not here. Some lucky person.
It still amazes me that, I do a couple of analog records a year usually, and it's like if I go and cut the 2-inch tape, people freak out, and that used to be like so not a big deal. It was like we cut the tape into 1 million pieces.
I used to joke
So
about
what?
it, yeah, with the people who are like so shocked. I'm like, this is easy.
Yeah,
Two-track
exactly.
is a little more. You have to be more focused, and you can go solo things on a multi-track and figure out what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
It's easy for y'all.
There it is, Nick.
Yeah, respect.
There is no undo. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm very jealous of the experience you guys had with the tape recording, though, because it's something that people of my generation have pretty much missed out on, that experience of cutting and editing on tape. And I'm not going to do it because I'm not, unless I set up a session and just do it at, for practice 100 times to basically do that. But yeah, I mean, I should really, it's just time.
Do you ever have a client ask you, I want to do this a little more old school, and we use maybe not the tape machine, but do everything else?
Oh, I mean, we do analog records, not a ton, but we have a couple of 24-track machines.
That's cool.
And live to 2-track is one of my favorite things to do in the world.
Yeah, I feel like the limitation is a good challenge for me.
Absolutely.
It draws a lot out of me, I think.
Yep. Even just working digital, like on Radar, 24 tracks. I love that process. Yeah. Just,
Well,
that commit button again,
Right. I was going to say, if you're doing the audio suite stuff or committing, that's kind of like destructive record, right? That's the same.
Absolutely. I mean,
mentality.
I'm trying to get to what you guys did, in the 80s and people did in the 70s and the 60s, where
20s.
when you print in the 20s, wax cylinder, when you print something, it sounds different from doing it later. It just, when you go in through the compressor, however you're doing it, or if you have a bunch of background vocals and you bust them through a compressor and then print it in, it sounds completely different from doing it on the console or doing it in the box. So I just want to get that.
And it makes you make different decisions, because the next thing you do is based on the previous thing that you're locked into. You're not going to reassess that because it's printed. You're done. So the next overdub has to go with that.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
It makes you think ahead a lot more, which is what I like about it. I think way ahead of where I'm at.
What's interesting too is we're talking about flanger and micropitch and all that. I remember, when someone said, "Hey, let's flange that part," or whatever. So when someone said that, that meant that it was going to take probably minimum 2 hours just to set it up.
It meant Paul Prestopino was going to spend the next hour in your control room running the flanging or phasing for you. This is my bugaboo. Nobody called it flanging. It was always called tape phasing.
Tape flanging. Tape what?
Phasing.
Oh, phasing. And then we had one in Record Plant, the thing, the VSO, Varispeed, and the knob was this big.
Yeah.
And it was in a big cart, and we'd have to bring that up, and then you'd have to just get the right thing. So it could have taken I remember doing the end of freeze frame. Everything goes into a flange.
Yeah, right.
That probably took us 3 or 4 hours to do.
Yeah.
Whereas now it takes, you put a plug-in on, it's a minute. But the difference between doing it now and doing it years ago is, there was minimum, 4 or 5 people in a room. You're working on this part you're doing, and then all of a sudden it clicks and you listen back. And I always describe it this way: the euphoria that comes over you when you hear that, you can't get that out of the box at all in any way. So
I quit music after this call. I'm done. I'm gonna go get a job that actually pays me real money and get
next level.
Thanks,
Nick, I would have loved to have taken my tracks. I would have loved to have taken my tracks home and worked on them in my apartment back then. I couldn't do that. So
I'm in a project with Gareth Jones. He did a lot of the early Depeche Mode stuff, and he mixed my first band's record. And we were 23, and all we wanted was Neve and everything analog. And he was just on his computer laughing at us. And then now he's went back to all the analog stuff. But it's so interesting how we're all looking at each other for the young kids that come over using 15-year-olds are making the most sophisticated music I've ever heard in my life that I still can't make to this day. And it's so interesting to see how all of our process makes who we are and then how we collaborate. I just listening to you guys, I'm getting the goosebumps, because we'll never get to be there, but we're us, and I don't know, it's really I guess I don't quit music, I take it all back. But,
good, glad to have you back.
I'm back.
There's still no money in it.
I never had money anyway, so nothing's changed much,
But
Yeah,
you
I
know, part of the reason people get nostalgic, I think, is that, you know, there was a lot of how can I abuse something or use it in a way that it was not intended and come up with something new rather than just like, oh, I want this effect, here's the button that gets me it. But that's also what's great about something like these plugins, that you can just sort of throw it on and play around with it and see what happens, as opposed to walking in with a preconception of what you're trying to get. That I know, just playing around with it for 3 or 4 days, I found stuff that I would not have gone in looking for in a good way. That makes sense to anybody?
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like a discovery thing.
Well,
Yeah.
it's nice, to have all the Eventide that you know in the back of your mind, like to come up in 1 second. Like now we have 20 of them that we can just throw on and have the best sounds ever.
And we can have 20 of them.
Yeah,
All across the board, right?
Yeah, we have a million H3000 each one of us.
It's like, why spend, you know, how much money on a Fairchild when you can spend a couple $100 for 50 of them?
Or
They all sound the same, right?
at least 50 pictures of them.
Yeah.
And that's where then the weed really comes in handy. Then they're real.
Yes, then it gets closer. Yeah.
You know something, looking back on it, you know, Bill, I think you were a little ahead of your time when I was working with you. The two things that I want to bring up, one of the things that you did that I do all the time now is you gate the room off the snare.
Yeah, I don't do it as much as I did in the 80s, but
Right.
yes, right.
But what you did on Girls, didn't you have the wasn't that Anton's snare? I mean, the drummer's room mic and the Lindrum, right?
It was, I don't remember if there
like you didn't put his real snare in. It was
the only real snare is the gated compressed room mic.
Right. Which is
And then
kinda cool.
it was mixed with like an 808 clap that was distorted and something else. It was no real snare drum at all.
Gotcha. How did you trigger that stuff back then?
Anton played it, but we just didn't use it. I
Gotcha.
mean, Anton Fig played a real snare drum, but all it was doing was triggering the distant ribbon mic I had up in the corner, and that was all we used.
And do you remember the way we used to trigger snares before trigger?
You mean before AMS?
Or sampling?
Yeah, sure.
Putting the snare on two chairs and sending it to the
Oh, through like an Oratone or something.
Ortone, yeah. And down here, there's a lot of older engineers. Brent Mayer is one. He recorded Proud Mary. But Bill Chenet lives here now.
Oh, he does? Wow.
Yeah. He's really, really cool, man. And he did Love is the Answer. Not Todd Rundgren. Emerson Joe, Frank Reynolds, whatever that was. England Dan and John Forcoli. And the claps in it was a loop of applause from like this gospel artist.
Oh, wow.
And he gated it off the snare.
Oh,
And
that's cool.
so it's all, you know, it's the stereo mix of applause. And
Yeah, that's clever.
you know, and that was probably in the 70s, the late 70s, early 80s. So that was really using his head there.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right then.
I have to say, I don't use a lot of gates at all anymore. I don't know. I've sort of now
I
that
still do that gated snare thing, Bill, thanks to you.
with a room mic, gating a room mic.
Yeah.
So Aaron, you mentioned earlier that you liked this effect for the delays, which you didn't expect. And Bill, you were talking about like that discovery thing too. Russ, I'm kind of wondering like what's the mentality when you're making this sort of thing? You know, is that kind of element present of like the intended use for something and what you want to end up with? You know, like where do you make those decisions to be like, okay, well, we're going to allow the user to tempo sync this and make it a full-on delay, you know?
I mean, a lot of that came out of it being a guitar pedal because it was originally in Pitch Factor.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time that I did this, I think I was junior DSP engineer, and a buddy of mine, Dan, had started it, and he said, "Hey, make this more like the H3000." So I keep using the word forensics. No, it's not dead. People still use it. It was like detective work. This one, as opposed to some of the other algorithms that I put like a lot more of like personalization into. This was like, all right, make it like that classic H3000 micro shift thing. And that actually has delays in it. You don't know it because you have to expose the expert parameters.
You have to be the expert.
Yeah. And the other thing that is confusing is that the manual was wrong and it misled everyone because the H3000 manual had block diagrams in it that showed you the algorithm. And so originally we looked at the block diagram. Everyone said it's the H3000 microshift algorithm or whatever. And we looked at the block diagram. We made an algorithm that looked like the block diagram. And we could never get it to sound the same until I realized that when I dug in those expert parameters, that the manual was telling us that famous preset was the wrong algorithm.
Wow.
I don't know if that was on purpose.
Fantastic.
Made to mislead.
Yeah, so it was, I can't remember. I think it was like I don't remember all the names. I just remember it actually, the famous thing is built on something else. And then once we went through and rearranged all those delays and put them in the right place and then hooked up there's a lot of parameters in there. The delays and the voices cross feed each other. So it's not like independent feedback across each voice.
Okay.
So in the H3000, you can adjust those independently. We didn't have that many knobs on the guitar pedal. So we just, for a lot of these parameters, of which there are like 20 something, we just sort of picked the default setting. So in this plugin, which has the default, it maintains that cross feed. I think it's like 70%, 30% or something, right? So
gotcha. So you were definitely building off of something that was.
Yeah, this was a more of a like preserve the sound type of exercise.
Right.
I think when you put it in a guitar pedal, like I don't remember if the H3000 had any of that tempo sync stuff. No, we wanted to do.
You could tap at most. Yeah.
You could tap. Yeah.
Do math.
Yeah, so we did all the math to do the note values, and we added that because that's a good performance feature. All the ribbon stuff fell out of the way the original expression pedal worked in the pedals.
Oh, cool.
And so we just for all these things, we made a graphical representation of expression pedal that people could, so.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool thing to make because it's like kind of open-ended to leave a performance macro that's user programmable in a plugin. Right. So it's like anybody could approach that a number of different ways. You could use it to do a delay throw, like on one side, you've got your sweetening and then you sweep it to the other end and that's your delay setting.
Totally do something like that. Yeah, for sure.
Sucks back in. Yeah. I think you were saying something like that earlier, Roy. Every now and again, I'll just like use it to scrub for like the right spot in the preset. I'll be like, I like this, and this is where it sounds perfect.
I have a Raven also, so it makes you want to sort of reach out and touch that ribbon and do what you're saying. Just, oh, that's the spot right there. It's very inviting.
You have a Raven? Is it in your house or is it outside in a...
Get it?
On a clothesline?
Is there a Poe joke in here somewhere?
Yeah.
How does the Raven sound, Bill? Did you get a tweaked one? Did you get the modded one, Bill? Or the better sound?
Yeah. So I have a question. So the jumping off point for MicroPitch was the fact that the 910 and 910 harmonizer drifted a little, and people liked that it varied a little and sort of created an ADT kind of thing because it was unintentionally drifting. So this does that in some great way, but my question is it still random like that, or are you building in some sort of modulation at a fixed frequency point? Not to get too nerdy.
Too late.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it's drifting. I don't think I've built in any random.
It's not random, right?
Yeah. There's modulation. There's a modulation knob.
To be. Yeah.
But that's more of a vibrato thing.
Yeah.
I think that's just a sine wave.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But for example, if you set a 910 to -2 cents, it's not staying there. It's bouncing around. But in this case, if you set -2, that's it? It's locked in at -2?
Yeah, it stays there. Yeah, it's locked in.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the drifty ones. If I could have
exactly
in a mix situation or whatever you're doing, I feel like the more sort of unlinked chorusy type of things, they're not related to one another, the more I feel like things smooth out in a mix,
Yeah,
so I
exactly.
want to put all the instruments in one stereo chorus. I want them all to be a little different.
Yeah.
Maybe they could be like a drift knob.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
It's
it?
why, it's why, for example, I don't ever, almost never use those quarter note, eighth note, 16th note presets because I don't like really, really in time. I like everything to be just slightly
Little
moving
bit out.
around a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a drummer here who refuses to let me know the tempo of the song because he hates
Yeah.
me. Greg Morrow. No, Greg, right?
Sure.
Bill? Yeah.
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 No, I think
You
he's
know,
right. I
Speaking
mean,
of which,
that stuff works on a dance record, but otherwise, I don't really want things strictly in time.
Right.
and you remember the way we'd find out the perfect tempo? You would get like a snare drum and you would send it to whatever it is, and you'd feed it back, and so that that was in time, and that's how you zeroed in on.
I just said 262 milliseconds, and it always works.
Magic
We used to
numbers.
use a stopwatch. Yeah.
Yeah.
11 beats.
Richard, I have a question. Earlier you were talking about that Zach Wilde sound, and we're talking about like how this effect is calling upon, the Eventide history with the 910 and the H3000. When something like this comes out, are you listening to that and saying like, oh, hey, great, that's that sound that I know, and I'm gonna use it for TV in this way so that when the viewers are watching, they associate it with that? Or are you also looking for like new sounds and new ways to use these things?
I would say no. It's just, it makes it ferocious, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
Just nasty. It makes it bigger and meaner and more angry. And for this particular guitar sound, that's what I wanted, not for the high string, but it's just the simplicity of this plugin to make something bigger is incredible. And well designed, guys, well designed.
That's a good quote. You should have the simplicity of, what did you say? Say that again. It should be in the quotes.
Simplicity of this plugin makes it easier to use, or makes it it's amazing. Because I came from the H3000 and stuff, and that thing was a pain in the ass to use.
Yeah, I mean,
-9 +9, get it out of my life. But this thing, I'm tweaking, right? Mikey and I were talking about how we tweaked this thing already. It's like, wow, it's really useful.
yeah, and like you were saying, just like how easy to use it is, because I worked in a studio that had an H3000 for years, and I almost never touched it because, I don't know, just like the number pad and the one giant jog wheel, and it was just like,
I don't think Paul.
I don't know about that.
I don't know, man. It's so easy.
Well, it probably wasn't plugged in, but
Yeah.
no, 'cause
This is the
Don't
clubhouse
be
in
afraid of the
Rhinebeck. A
H3000.
bunch of us worked at the clubhouse in Rhinebeck, and Paul's joke was it worked yesterday.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, like, I almost never used that there, and then I got the plug-in version of it, and I took a little bit of time to dive a little bit deeper, but it was still like, man, this thing is so deep. But like with this one, just being able to dial in an awesome sound in 20 seconds is pretty incredible. I don't have to
Try
go
to
in-
document one of those H3000s.
Well, but you could store them. I mean, I would just store a couple of things that I would always go back to at a particular studio. But
Would do the
this,
same thing.
the cool thing about this is there's something about the interface, maybe because it comes from Guitar Pedal World, that encourages you to play around with it more, I think.
Mhm.
I think so.
Yeah, that's probably like, I don't know, 80% of my job back then was trying to take classic Eventide and make it playable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Pretty
my
good
title
job,
was,
man.
That was the
Thank you for that.
task.
that was the task. Our title was DSP engineer, but like occasionally you would have to do some DSP to like make something not click when you turned a knob.
Mhm.
But it was really more about being a musician at the time.
Well, we appreciate it.
And Crush
Yeah.
Station is incredibly easy to use because I used it inside the H9 a lot, but now I use it on bass. I use it on all kinds of stuff. The Crush Station is awesome.
Crush Station is
Yeah, the Crush
awesome.
Station.
Love the
Yeah.
Crush Station.
That's a good point. A lot of you guys are
Station.
using the H9 pedal already, right? Like,
I got a couple
Um,
of them.
Same.
are you finding that you're using some of these effects that were ported from the H9 differently since?
Yeah, because you
Yeah,
can
your
access them easier.
Right.
So I have more access to the Crush Station. Putting it on bass is just ridiculous, man. I was doing it today.
Yeah, I made that because I'm a bass player, and I just got
Oh,
sick of
see that?
I got sick of
There it is.
distortions
Yeah.
without a mix knob. I was like, I need a mix knob.
Yeah.
They should all have a mix knob.
It's funny, 'cause
Agreed.
about a half hour ago, or just before we went on, Mikey and I were on the phone with each other he was walking me through the pitch shifting aspects of Crush Station.
Yeah, there's an octave
absolutely
up and
love
down.
that feature. The octave down in that is like absolutely killer.
I think it's probably the same module that's in MicroPitch. We call them DSP modules. We reuse code across them.
Mhm.
So it's probably the same one, I would imagine. Yeah.
It's pretty nasty.
Well, when you do pitch shifting before distortion, there was like an internal debate of where we should put that pitch shifter in the algorithm. And I was like, no, we're going to crush it in. We got to crush it. So I was like, it's got to be before.
Agreed. Yeah. Like
I hear compression. I clearly hear compression.
That's in the sustain knob.
I know, and it's nasty cool.
Yeah, that was the other thing is now we're talking about Crush Station. Sorry, Colin.
Yeah.
And we're 50 minutes in. It's not that. It was one of those make a compressor playable. How do you like all those old guitar compressor pedals that had one knob and you just was like compression?
The MXR.
Like the MXR, that orange Crush thing, I think is probably that type of thing. I was like, well, how do I make a one knob compressor? And then I realized, it's nice to be able to do it before or after distortion because you get it does different things to the harmonics. So
good job.
Yeah, that was an interesting one to try to dial in too.
I think
the coders, man, the real MVPs, baby. You guys are insane.
To answer Colin's question earlier a little bit more, because I've been using the H9 forever. I use it on guitar. I've used it for like an H3000 that travels with me for front of house. I've
and in
certain
Nerve,
things,
right, with Joe
yeah, exactly. And so there's certain things that'll work live that won't work in the studio, and there's certain things that won't work live. Like I can't really use pitch shift. I mean, like micro shifting live. It's just too subtle with a band like that. But in the studio, I can use these sort of things in a completely different way. So that's been really great for me, is rediscovering these algorithms that maybe I've had to write off that just don't work for the sort of music I use it for guitar, or they don't work for live. To be able to use like the Crush Station on a drum kit, or like on a room mic or a crotch mic, or to be able to, stack them up in a row as well, because obviously like with an H9, you've got one plugin at a time, but if I'm going to Crush Station into micro, pitch shifting into something else, into a black hole reverb, that's where it gets really fun for me as well. It's just like totally destroying the sounds.
And
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like just having it as a plugin as opposed to a guitar pedal, like not regarding any of the technical aspects, but just I don't have an H9, but like I have the space reverb pedal, and I always love the black hole setting in that.
Yeah,
and I'd pretty much just use it on guitar because it's a guitar pedal. That's just what you think of. But then like when the black hole plugin came out, all of a sudden I'm putting that on piano and vocal and everything. So just having it as a different form factor kind of makes you think about it differently.
Totally. It's great on synths too. Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah. A lot of people you'll see on YouTube using the H9 or the Space with their desktop synth setup.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. There's even a modular synth version of it now. Somebody ported it over.
I know you see those every now and again too.
Yeah.
I have one of them auxed into like a Mackie mixer with all my synths, and then you can just go through it, whichever one. Like while
you did that with the Moog performance last Saturday, right?
Yeah, I was a monster.
Yeah, that was killer.
I was using the monster voice a lot. That was because when I have the iPad, running all the preset list and stuff. So then it's just my iPad's right here, and then you can just start flipping through everything. It's so much fun.
And then that's still just sitting on your effects return.
Yeah. I could turn the camera. Well, some of this stuff's taken out, but yeah, it's in there with an octave track and some other stuff. Usually,
that's great.
Yeah, that's kind of the land I live in. And then another one on the console for the computer. And then, well, I guess now we got 50,000 of them since y'all are breaking them up into individual units. So it keeps we can keep using it more and more and more.
I have a question about MicroPitch and synths. Maybe from a historical perspective. So one of the original things, and this predates pitch shifting, is that like on synthesizers, you could just mix in a detuned voice, right? To get a fat sound, right? That's
Well, you control the tune of the oscillator by hand.
yeah. And then it's like, did this MicroPitch thing on actual vocals and stuff happen by accident because the 910 drifted, or was there some? Do you guys think that people were thinking synthwise, or is it just was it just convergent evolution? It's just a good idea. It happened.
I think the latter. I think the fact that it drifted by accident drew attention to the fact that it made that subtle doubling that people liked. And then and as Steve or somebody talked about, we did that anyway with Verispeed and actual ADT and other ways we tried to do those things. I think it's more that than from the synth world, I think.
They seem to be different worlds at the time as well. You know, those were sort of people in the synth world were doing their thing, and then there was pop music, which was, you know, sometimes convergent, but a little less so.
Studio scene versus other scenes. You know, I remember we were trying to use delays when I first started, static delays, you know, and other things. And Tony Bon Jovi would be like, no, you got to try the 910 and make sure it's just on the edge, so it's kind of
trying to make it drift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Setting it on the edge. He used to say it's got to be vacillating a little bit.
Yeah.
But it worked, and some people use more than one for
that. Talking about the heavy guitar thing reminded me of something great guitar player Adam Rogers was telling me about. He was looking for a couple of H910s, and he was saying that was the Van Halen sound. Was a couple of those slightly, you know, the chorusy super wide thing. So, you know, that makes sense. That's a sound that, yeah. That was news to me as well. Yeah.
The guy I'd like to meet is Don Landy, who did some of those early records.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing sounding.
Yeah.
I thought that he was using the Eclipse, but I'm not
Van
sure.
Halen?
Yeah.
He might now, but back in the late 70s, it was only.
Like the first record, that kind of thing, and maybe. It'd be interesting to know, though. I mean, everybody has their own process.
I think a lot of that Billy Idol, Steve Stevens stuff's also same thing of harmonizer, just a little pitch shifty and mixed in and drifting.
And I love those things. They sound great.
Yeah.
Those are great records.
Yeah.
Somewhere on the internet, there was like a diagram of the Van Halen live or setup, and it included some harmonizers. And, you know, I don't remember. There was like 2 or 3 of them. I don't know if this is just internet gobbledygook folklore, but it looked believable.
Hard to say. It's hard to know. You know?
Take notes, everybody. No.
Yeah. I also heard he had H910s in his bathroom in case he wanted to plug his guitar up. So
I'm not, baby.
That's cool. If you can play, why not? You know?
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, guys, this has been a really fun time. Thanks again so much for sharing this hour with us for the Quarantide Hang.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So yeah, let's just take a moment to sign off. We'll go around and tell the people watching where they can find you on social and whatever current or future projects they can be on the lookout for. And we'll start with Steve.
Again with me.
We can change it up. It's up to you.
I'm currently not in the middle of much anymore. I finished my projects before, and I'm not taking anything until after this is all done. But, you know, I do a thing on Facebook. It's called Pro Tools Basics, and I'm helping out all the artists and musicians that are stuck home, that aren't on tour anymore, and they forgot how to work in Pro Tools. So I'm helping them out a bit.
Yeah, cool.
It's really rewarding.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good question. Maybe before we do this, does anybody have any tips for like how to stay motivated and like continue working on stuff and improving during the pandemic?
I love staying up late at night, and maybe I can hang out with Nick here in a little while. But I was getting into the when you were talking about feedback and the delays in the micro pitch shift. And I was having a blast. I love just sitting in front of my computer, going over effects and going over different sounds, just to stay current with all you youngsters out there, because I'm blown away by everything I've heard today. I learned so much from all of you, and I really appreciate you having me today. So I appreciate it.
Do I.
Yeah.
For me, I've just been trying to use this time to look inwards and try to look at my weaknesses. And I feel like once this is all over, we're really going to be so excited to be in a room together and look what I can bring. Because I feel like each one of us knows what we're good at, what we're working on, and really try to look at what your next, visualize what your next sessions are going to be and how to walk into that room prepared and confident. And like, I can't wait to see everyone. I can't wait for the, you know, like, and I think we're going to be so happy that that time's real again. And that's what I've been practicing guitar every day, just going slow. I feel like when the world's running at this fast pace, we got to run with it. And to be able to slow down and like, we could shoot a layup now and just get like, really take it slow and grow. And even looking at these plugins, like we could sit there. So for me, it's just all that work. I think as your career evolves, all that work always pays off. And we all have a chance collectively to do it. So that's where I'm coming from.
That's great. Me too. I feel this is a great opportunity to get to those things and to learn those things that you've always wanted to sort of dig in a little deeper and really investigate.
We all love this so much, and the better you are at your craft, it becomes muscle memory, and you don't think about it anymore. And I think that's when you're a truly dangerous weapon in the studio, because you're just floating around in there. And I don't think any of us ever thought our lives would be remotely like this for this long. Like, so I hope everyone out there in here or out there can just grow a little bit, and then, you know, then we'll all meet up and let's get it, baby. It's time, you know.
Amen.
Amen. I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about the nurses and doctors, man. This is
Keep it on, man.
Out.
Absolutely. And you know, Bill's son works at a hospital. He's in charge of the, what is it, ER or something?
He runs an emergency department at NYU Brooklyn. Yeah.
Thanks to your son, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I don't know where I went wrong, but
Yeah. I think it's a great time to exercise new muscles, or reactivate muscles that maybe have atrophied and just regular life, like Nick was saying, and Steve as well. As you know, for me, it's been a great time to reactivate the writing muscle and the production muscle, and when I'm spending so much time just engineering other people's records, just to be as creative as possible and to let myself do those things on no time frame. And also, when I have been mixing projects, taking as much time as I want on them, not like banging out like a record in a day, but if I want to spend a day and a half on a song, come back to it in the morning with it stop on the console, that's been an absolute luxury to be able to do that. I
try to do that, but I always feel like I'm going to risk messing it up if I go too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I respond to that.
Aaron, do you want to continue our sign off there?
What was I supposed to say?
Just where they can find you on social and like what's coming up.
I'm like I said, I'm just trying to write music, collaborate with people. So I have a bunch of projects. You can pretty much find me on Instagram is the best way to find me, and I have links to what I'm working on there. And like Nick, I'm just excited to see people again and make some more music.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Mike?
Yeah, you can find me mostly on Instagram. My handle is @TheBunker Recordings. And yeah, just stoked to get back to working with people again.
Nick?
You can find me on Instagram at Nick Hook. I just put out a single with Gangster Boo from 3-6 Mafia. It's on Spotify. Yeah, just pull up to Instagram. I've been streaming live a little bit. I'm trying to figure out really how to navigate where we're at right now and like bring what I can to it, but I'm out here. You can find me.
Roy?
You could find me Instagram at Roy Hend. I truncated my name for now. It's so long. I've been really taking this time and lucky to have some indie projects to work on a little bit and really take my time with those and refine what I do. Now is the time for me to, like Nick was saying, is to kind of try to use this time to get better. But it's really great to actually spend some time with you guys online, and I really appreciate you asking me to be a part of this.
Yeah, this has been really cool. Thanks again, everybody, for
thank you.
joining in on this call. Richard?
I'm not on social media very much purposely.
Smart man.
I feel that.
Thank God. If there's one thing people are doing, they're watching television. So I'm still quite busy and blessed to do what I do. But again, Thanks both to you guys for making this great product, and good to see all you guys.
And you.
Back at you, Paisan.
Bill.
I'm on Twitter or my own web. I'm on Twitter as Weedy Wet, or my website weedywet.com. And I'm writing quite a bit these days for the Pro Tools Expert, or now Production Expert site, so you can see me musing and ranting there. And I'm also lucky that I have some indie projects I've been mixing and working on, and I've also working on my own music and writing and sort of finding. I think the opportunity here is to find the things that motivate us without an external pressure in a certain way. I think it's really easy, especially in the freelance life, to sort of be dragged along by what other people tell you should be doing tomorrow. And it's in some ways interesting to sort of say, well, what is the thing I want to do tomorrow? That, you know, try to take it as a positive rather
That's
than
the question that keeps coming up, I feel like. Yeah. And that's been good to take that time.
Yeah.
But thanks again for having me, and nice to see everyone and Steve.
Yeah, it was nice.
What do you mean, everyone and
Come
Steve?
on. Right at the very end, you had to throw shade. Again, guys, thank you so much for sharing. Thanks for tuning in. Check back here for any Eventide related news, and we'll see you in the next one. That's our time. This is the MicroPitch crew signing off.
All right.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Nice meeting all you guys, but I got your message, Russ.
Bye.